Almost 2 years ago, you all asked me many times what I thought of this image. Goku wearing a blindfold, earbuds in, no limbs, fatigued from a long battle, and plagued by the heart virus against Naruto at full power, in which the legend of Goku Cripple was officially born, after he has swiftly annihilated even the strongest interpretations of Naruto, even at his maximum strength. I'd like to revisit the topic of Goku Cripple against another one of his long-standing rivals, and that's the like of Saitama or the One Punch Man. This may seem odd, however, Goku vs Saitama has changed over time since I last talked about moving on to 4 years ago. We learned more about Saitama, and many interesting things about him were strangely retconned that you guys might actually find interesting. I think this topic is also good for the sheer fact that I'm tired of people bringing up Goku vs Saitama, and I'd like to end it here. So that's right, even if Saitama comes out and one-shots the god of his verse, I think Goku Cripple would still dog-walk him, and it's not really debatable. I'd also like to go over what things Saitama would have to show for us to really accept that this is worth talking about ever again. Overall, expect an informative and pretty amusing video, so sit back and learn some shit. In my Naruto vs Goku video here, I revealed the power level of Goku with no limbs, blind, deaf, fatigued, and stricken with the heart virus, who I would later call Goku Cripple. Goku Cripple, though, was surprisingly still pretty powerful. I demonstrated that throughout all his nerfs, it realistically didn't matter when compared to the likes of Naruto, Ichigo, or Luffy. I cited that Goku was extremely crippled against the likes of Piccolo Jr. and original Dragon Ball with no use of his limbs, yet was the only one with the power to be able to defeat him, even if all of Goku's allies were in the triple digits alongside Kami and Piccolo Jr.'s words, showing that his power level was still above 25% based on official numbers from V-Jump, Daizenshu, and statements made throughout Goku vs Piccolo in the 23rd Budokai itself. I showed that with the heart virus, that it was highly unlikely that it made him weaker than his hypothetical healthy base form as a 6th Super Saiyan, due to Vegeta's transformation against Android 19 and statements of his energy reserves post that battle, showing that heart virus Goku was likely still over 1/50th of his usual strength. Then I showed an example of Gohan, who was inferior to Goku as a fighter during the time of Dragon Ball Super and the Zen exhibition match, fighting completely blind and unable to even sense his opponent, but just feeling slight air pressures touching his hair and near his body, meaning he didn't even use hearing to deduce his opponent's location anyway. Meaning Goku Cripple is likely over 1/1000th the power level of Goku normally, even being extremely restrictive with the numbers. And for someone with Goku's catalog of feats, that's insane when it comes to other shonen or other battle mangas. We've also learned that Goku's Ultra Instinct has more details, such as more explanation of his Susanoo-like ability. The explanation for this is actually that Ultra Instinct is adapting to Goku's condition and his opponents, so when he's unable to physically move, like let's say for example in the Piccolo Jr. fight, the Ultra Instinct generates an avatar of energy that can fight for him instead of him having to fly through the air as a torso. Considering Goku can turn into Ultra Instinct with almost no energy remaining in the tournament of power and basically near death, it may not be unlikely he can quickly generate a UI Susanoo to combo Saitama in a quick burst. However, it doesn't change anything nor actually matter, and here's why. This video is sponsored by Raycon. With Mother's Day coming up, picking out a gift is always hard. Picking out something she'll actually use in her day-to-day life, especially something that fits into an active routine. Raycon's bone conduction headphones are honestly quite perfect for that. They sit just outside your ears and use bone conduction technology, sending sound through vibrations so your ears stay open to the world around you. They're perfect for staying in motion, and you can throw on a podcast, music, or even one of those power scaling videos while you're out walking or running if you don't want to use it as a gift. And still aware of everything around you, safety and sound all in one. I've been using mine pretty much every day, whether I'm doing chores, running errands, or just working. They're the ones I actually reach for over my other earbuds because I can still hear what's going on around me without sacrificing sound quality. And here's the best part, Raycon gives you premium performance without the premium price tag. Their quality rivals big audio brands at about half the cost. Over 3 million customers already love Raycon, and they come with a 30-day happiness guarantee. I know someone's mom would use these all the time, especially when she's out walking or just wants to listen to something without feeling completely shut off from everything around her. Or maybe one of you. So celebrate the moms in your life. Go to buyraycon.com/SethTheProgrammer BC to get 15% off the bone conduction headphones. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video once again. Moving on to his opponent for this video, Saitama's attack potency is one of those topics where the more you look into it, the messier it gets. In the manga, the best feat currently shown is a punch from Saitama and Garou, destroying a chunk of stars in the firmament of the night sky, or at the very least, making them appear to have vanished in some way. This is one of the better examples of someone potentially destroying multiple solar systems I think I have really ever seen, and this would be all we wrote about it unless we lived in a specific point in time. But we all know that this isn't even really good enough for Goku. In fact, Goku Cripple, while heavily suppressed, is still an incomprehensible, limbless deity in comparison to that feat. So let's discuss the elephant in the room that gives Saitama even a remote fighting chance, and that is Empty Void and the One Punch Man manga redraws. So for those who don't know, there is a section of the manga that covers the fight with Empty Void, who is a ninja empowered by the series' supposed overarching villain, God. In this encounter, Empty Void resides outside of the universe in a higher dimensional space and slashes down with dimensional slashes, which Saitama is able to grab and then pull Void down back to Earth. Seems like a pretty cool and concrete feat, you'd think, except Murata decided to redraw that arc entirely, and by doing so, he excluded almost all of the good stuff from it. The exception being a statement about the God villain being from a higher dimension. This essentially means that the impressive stuff we talked about isn't even canon anymore. See, One Punch Man is a volume manga, and the individual chapters we get are essentially provisional. Other manga do this as well, even in Naruto, where Kishimoto would touch up headbands and whatnot for the final volume releases. Murata, being on an it's done when it's done schedule, is able to redraw much more than the overworked weekly 2000s mangaka. So the One Punch Man reader base has seen Murata redraws in the past, like with Child Emperor vs Phoenix Man, or even Garou's table flip scene. When this happens, we ignore the previous version, as it quite literally will not be in the final volume release. As an example, this is why nobody uses the chapter extra statement that Saitama took damage from Boros during their fight anymore, which was actually very popular when the series and that fight was first in debut. As in the final releases and all subsequent versions, that statement no longer exists. The only real difference here is how much of an upgrade the Empty Void stuff seemed to be. Now, I personally don't think it perfectly correlates with, say, Saitama's attack potency or durability, which may sound really weird, but let me explain. The way the slashes are described are kind of like a world-cutting slash from Sukuna in Jujutsu Kaisen when he takes down Gojo. Interacting with space itself isn't really something new for OPM, as we have seen Garou and Saitama directly interact with one of Blast's hyperspace gates, as well as Saitama interacting with Garou's that he can generate as well. One core problem with the Empty Void feat is that it is essentially like throwing a ball down into an arena. Empty Void is outside of the universe, and slashing down into it, or an example, throwing the ball down from an incomprehensible angle. While Goku is in the arena and his shockwaves are rippling and threatening not just one arena, but multiple, separated on the same axis that the slash would be coming from. That would mean not only is Empty Void not actually, say, destroying an entire universal macrocosm body like Goku is, but Goku's shockwaves demonstrably would reach out and affect the ninja even in that space, and ultimately surpass the feat probably entirely. But let's assume this is a higher dimensional feat for Saitama anyway. I still believe he is probably weaker than Goku without limbs. Remember, Goku in Battle of Gods alone is not only likely higher dimensional, but even higher into it than just the baseline. See, the universe itself should probably be considered fourth dimensional. This has been the case for years in academia and has been shown with mathematics and famous papers like Einstein's or the textbooks that cover his works, which I'll show a few on screen now. Trust me, raw dogging these papers is not fun because we don't know exactly how much of a fourth vector of the universe has anyway. Most power scalers and debaters will roughly lump 4D feats together, but destroying, say, a 4D tesseract, which is a fourth dimensional version of, say, like a cube, or a universe, are basically the same when you're comparing them to, say, a three-dimensional being. This is sort of an exaggerated way of ballparking than saying the difference between an F1 racing car and a NASCAR doesn't matter if it is racing a human on foot. So not only is Goku threatening to destroy one universe, but three. The living world, the afterlife, and heaven, alongside the Kaioshin realm, which is a comparable large percentage of the universe. The afterlife itself contains so much space that an infinitely compared living world and heaven can disappear in just the sky. which puts him in a form of multiversal ranges, depending on who you asked. Now, you remember how I said we don't know exactly how much of a fourth vector a universe would have? Well, we also wouldn't know how far another universe would have to be away when lined up on this fourth vector. So Dragon Ball has some decent evidence for some insane types of cosmology, as well as we see the distance between King Kai's planet and Earth is seen as shorter than the distance between Beerus's planet and Earth. This would support them moving along another axis to probably get to another world. An analogy for multiversal would be like if you could not only destroy, say, a house, but also the next house over. But unfortunately, like I said, we don't actually have a model in modern physics that could describe the distance between the two houses. The distance between the two houses is incomprehensibly large. So it is for the most part an all or nothing tier, but by that I mean you either are multiversal or you aren't. Like barring some extreme examples like someone who is infinitely stronger than destroying a single universe, or like Kaioken or something on top of a universal feat. It's not necessarily enough to get into like another tier, but the tiering doesn't matter. Let's just analyze the feats. So even in our Steelman scenario, if Saitama is a little bit higher dimensional on a lot of tiering systems, the slashes demonstrably aren't as big as a universe. Meanwhile, Goku's shockwaves are spreading throughout multiple, infinitely and expanding and eternal realms. The mathematics to describe the area of effect here would end up looking like infinite on the normal 3 dimensions of space, and then some finite value for the space between universes on the 4th axis. That would represent Goku, while Saitama is highly finite amongst 3 vectors, and then some vague value of the 4th. So Goku just has way stronger 3D arguments and an even better 4D argument, and Saitama just has a vague 4D vector and then very finite 3D vectors. This sounds very complicated, and I hope that the editing kind of puts some numbers for justice here, but unfortunately this is where we're at with this type of stuff these days. But if you want a simple explanation, Saitama blows up a few stars, Goku blows up every star, you know, there you go. Currently these days though, many power scales like to try and hope that they can argue their characters are any form of 4th dimensional because no amount of 3D power can compare to it. So if you get a cheap 4th dimensional statement cleared, you can cheer and hoorah and play skeptical to anybody else being as tough as your 4D statement. But the problem is that when this is done, it doesn't really put them into any further level of 4D. I'm sure from here, many One Punch Man stands will try to bring up some exponential growth scene from the Garou fight, like Saitama is Broly or something, and insist that Saitama would just get strong enough to eventually beat up Goku cripple. However, it is explicitly stated that Genos' death was what allowed him to go through said growth, so this isn't something he can just get up and do whenever he wants. Even if we did say it was, the graph has 0 metrics to judge how strong he gets. So for those of you who have never took algebra or some science classes, you have to label your graphs and label them consistently, as if you don't, the graph is basically useless. We could take any data set and graph it consistently to make the data set appear however we want. So the graph, because it has no numbers, it can't be quantified. It could actually just be a very minute difference in strength. To make a long story short, Goku has a better case for being 4D, he is higher into it, and his feat is actually canon. And not only that, but he surpasses that feat probably trillions to potentially infinite times within the narrative, which I go over in many videos here, like this Jiren one, Goku trapped in the time chamber, how strong is Goku, blah blah blah. Because this video is pretty short and concise, I thought I would add an extra little addition, kind of unscripted, where I kind of go over some basic ideas as well that I think should probably be mentioned if you actually care about them. So the first one is that I kind of didn't really touch up on speed too much. A lot of people will bring it up, but Saitama's speed is actually pretty terrible. For the most part, he has like a couple times FTL feet where he's going around a planet with Garou or Moon, and it can be calced at many times the speed of light. Some people calc it to be around 20 times the speed of light, where he's dashing through all of this debris through the atmosphere here, or 1,000 times the speed of light. Just MFTL in general, one of those lesser MFTL feats. It's not necessarily like one of those cosmic spanning feats where, you know, a character traveling to another galaxy in a week, or, you know, across the solar systems and across space in general in a short period of time could be millions of times FTL as an example. So it's nothing like that, but in terms of, say, like Shonen Jump, it is pretty impressive just on the ground level. Some people still debate if, say, Naruto or Bleach characters ever reach light speed as an example. So that is pretty good. Now, there is another feat where his fist collides with Garou's, and they sort of evaporate or dissipate all these stars in this circular donut shape you see on the screen. Now, this could be trillions, quadrillions times the speed of light. It's implied to happen instantly. Some people will cope and say, you know, it dissipated the light that you see the stars. They're there later, but we know that they just travel through dimensions or to a different area, and that's why the stars return. So that could be calced as a very serious speed feat. However, the problem with calculating, say, a fist colliding or, say, an energy explosion from a type of attack or collision is that it doesn't work in Saitama's favor, actually, as many people will remember that Goku, while not even possibly a trillionth of Beerus's max power, which I go over in my Jiren video here, him colliding his fist with Beerus has his energy expand throughout the entire macrocosm of Universe 7 pretty much instantly. In the manga, it is instant. Now, the anime does make it for a dramatic effect that it's like a wave traveling through, but the anime also makes it clear that the universe is a lot bigger than the manga does. The manga is a lot more vague and a bit more ambiguous. Now, the reason this is important is, theoretically speaking, and I don't care, I'll debate you guys on this, Goku could Hulk clap so fast that he could make a shockwave that could span the macrocosm in an instant in the manga. And I actually will throw hands on that, you know, literally here, because there's no reason he can't. And it might sound like, you know, oh, he's making up some headcanon for Goku's skill set here, but what happened with Goku versus Beerus is that Goku and Beerus are heavily restricting their powers. Goku more so. Goku is specifically trying to control his ki so there's no radius in his attack. In fact, even Broly while rampaging has this ability, but Super Saiyan God is such an insane amp that Goku just isn't able to control it properly while he exudes some like higher dimensional godlike powers, okay? Even when he turns into Vegito, as an example, he can control himself. And when he turns into Super Saiyan God in the enemy, he's stumbling around, not even using like arguably like 50%. So you get the idea. Now, what happens when Goku just Hulk claps as hard as he can? Like, if he's in Ultra Instinct, trillions of times stronger than he is during this fight with Beerus, he Hulk claps. Why does he not generate a more powerful shockwave in whatever direction he wants? And in fact, there's no reason he can't. So that means Goku can also just generate attacks that can do what Saitama and Garou did, and it's just completely meaningless. Not only that, but the universe in Dragon Ball is debatably actually infinite. You could say very great, eternal. You know, there's so many different translations. There's like 80 scans talking about its eternalness, its endlessness, its expansiveness, whatever, right? Either way, is there a proof that Saitama's feat is going to be better? Never. There's literally never going to be a case where that is true. Now, furthermore, people will bring up the exponential nature of Saitama. Now, the reason I kind of sidestep this is because it really is subjective. There is no numbers to the graph. I mean, if you want to be very empirical, maybe you could say he gets like, I don't know, a couple times, a dozen times, just being very literal with the transition or the scale of the graph that we see without any numbers. Maybe you could say it's like up to a few dozen times or something. The problem with that, though, is that as I went over in my Ultra Instinct video like a billion years ago, I'm becoming an ancient being, Goku grows 100,000 times stronger in 40 minutes. So you then have to go, how long is this Saitama Garou battle? Goku also grows stronger. Now, you could say that in this case, Goku would have a heart virus, he'd be dying. But the thing as well is that it might not be as you think, where this Goku, even while kind of fatigued and out of it, he can regain his power as a Super Saiyan 3 at this point. That's the level of power he has. He has a divine ki set. So we've never seen the heart virus interact with divine ki either. Now, I do understand the irony, though, of bringing up like the Goku Hulk clap in a video where Goku has no limbs. Okay, I get it. But in theory, Goku could make like the UI Susanoo still and clap his big Susanoo hands, maybe. He could also potentially just click his tongue or something. I think his tongue click with full ki, maybe copium, it's still stronger than his punch is like a Super Saiyan God at like less than a trillionth of his maximum power. Who knows? But you get the idea. Like, in terms of just Saitama versus Goku stuff, there really is nothing for Saitama. And I think that's really all that needs to be said. And that's why, for the majority of the video, I just skimmed through it and said, prove it, prove it, prove it. I'm done arguing with you. This is stupid. Prove it, prove it, prove it. Arale has better gag feats. She's like a hyper-versatile gag character, weaker than Beerus and End of Z Goku. What has Saitama ever done other than basically vague posting? Like, Saitama is just pure vague posting in power scaling terms, and then people have ran with it forever, and it's just dead. And I just want to put a coffin on it and put the lid on it forever, because nothing's going to change unless God in One Punch Man becomes some outer versatile being. Not impossible, but I think this video will probably be all I need to say about it for many years. Goku is simply stronger by a ton. And to address the other elephant in the room, if you are a Saitama fan who is insisting on the empty void stuff still being canon, I don't want to hear anything from you if the Beerus arc remake doesn't have that multiverse feed in it. Not that it matters anyway, considering the original Super anime will be canon to the Moro arc later. As I outlined in How Strong is End of Z Goku, Goku likely outscales Arale even in the anime by the time he surpasses Beerus. Not so much the manga though. But current Goku may not even if End of Z Goku does. But she has blatant multiple tiers of a type of fictional transcendence in a gag, reaching probably some type of like hyper-versal, higher dimensional levels of scaling, and probably even blatantly fast enough to run through time through visual storytelling. Something Saitama could only really do with a specific technique he learned from Garou, learning how the universe and time function as more of a hacks ability rather than raw speed like Arale, or even just moving and stop time like Goku, Zeno, and many other characters potentially do. Saitama also doesn't really time reverse in character. He'd probably lose before that, and him doing that was a very specific niche moment where he wanted to rewind the consequences of a battle. The last thing to address is the comedy aspect of Saitama's power. Unfortunately, Saitama vs. Garou was a bit more of a serious bout with comedic aspects. And in fact, I think many One Punch Man fans are probably disappointed by how serious it really became. We saw the empirical limits of his powers as they grew, proving he wasn't some omnipotent punch character that could never be described or measured anymore. This graph, while unquantifiable, literally debunks the entire notion that One Punch Man debaters have been trying to argue for years, with their only argument now being that Saitama farted in his fight or some stupid shit. And I'm actually not joking. They would unironically tell you that even though he has a graph of the limits of his power increasing, that because he farted and it was funny, he could beat anybody in fiction, or because he said a one-liner one time. It really is next level coping. So not only does Arale just have better gag powers, literal feat showings, but Saitama lost a lot of his oomph over the years, and even more when his only potential good, real, serious argument that maybe you can debate around Goku if you're really uppity about it and say, nah, Goku's not 4D, that guy, it's gone. So yeah, even Goku with no limbs, blindfolded, unable to hear, stricken with the heart virus, and after fighting an intense battle to where he's almost passing out, would still whoop Saitama's ass. I'm sure we'll have to revisit this topic in 2030 or something, if I'm still even here on YouTube, but maybe I'll just come back for the fun of it. Either way, subscribe, have a good rest of your day, God bless,